Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the 16th chapter in the book of Psalms. And like a lot of Psalms, there's a title which precedes it. This gives us authorial information, historical context, the type of prayers, the type of musical instruments, or the tunes to which they were accompanied for. So Psalms were originally, even though we read them as poetry, we read them as poetry, they were in fact originally lyrical poetry set to music to be sung in liturgical services, so that this is one of the ones that has a title, and the title simply reads A Poem of David. Now in the Hebrew original, we read that it is a Mishgal of David, and for instance, Psalm 15 is a Psalm of David, Psalm 17 is a prayer of David. So this is a poem of David, but the term Mishgal only else appears in chapters 56 through 60, where David is usually in danger and in trouble. There's no evidence or indication or inference that he is in a troubled state right here. This is in fact a psalm of praise and dramatic Old Testament witness to the resurrection. That comes towards the end of the verse. But verse 1 reads, "Keep me, O El, for I have taken refuge in you." So this is his sole request and sole petition, to keep him, preserve him, protect him, and he's reminding him that he has taken refuge in him. That means safety, solace, sanctuary, and shalom. So he is an ark of safety for those who fear him, and those who fear him need not fear anything else. But the refuge, the quality of the refuge forms the basis of the remainder of the prayer, because Psalms are not only lyrical poetry, they're also prayers. They are guidelines in our devotional lives, which should inform and influence our own prayers. And one of the practices I like to encourage is reading 5 Psalms a day, because there are 150 Psalm chapters in the book of Psalms. A lot of months have 30 days in them, so you get it in a monthly cycle and you notice new things. But that's just an assignment I maybe want to leave. I want to return to the lesson itself. "I have said to Yahweh, you are Yahweh. I have no good besides you." So he's telling us that he told him being Yahweh, that he is who he says he is. When Moses asked him for his what his name was, he revealed it as Yahweh. That means I am that I am. That is his covenantal name. It translates as an eternally self-existent one, and he is uniquely good. In fact, it would have been blasphemous for any human to claim to be good in the Hebrew culture, because according to them, only God was good, uniquely, intrinsically, and thoroughly and totally, and no goodness in us can exist apart from him. So he who is totally and perfectly and wholly good does give us what limited doses we have, but before him we are not good. And David acknowledges that he is his only source of good. Whatever goodness he has comes from him, who is uniquely and intrinsically good. "As for the saints who are on the earth, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight." So Christianity is not a lonely path. It is a communal dimension, and it is a team effort. There is always, even though there comes at times when you're the only Christian in the room, you're the only one Christian in the office, you're the only Christian in whatever setting you are, there is in fact a fellowship of like-minded believers across history and across the earth, and there is comfort in that, even though there does come times where we have no choice but to stand alone for him. But they're literally all over the earth, and they're described by David as excellent in character, excellent in morals, excellent in just general demeanor. And the existence of these saints throughout his kingdom and all over the earth was a source of delight and pleasure in its heart. And what a comfort it is to know that even when we are standing alone, we are never really alone, because one, we have the Spirit and the Son and the Father with us when we are taking a stand alone for him, but that's getting a little distractive. The sorrows of those who run after another one are increased. I would not pour out the drink offering for blood. So he's talking about idolaters who are distinct from the saints. These are ones who worship false deities. These were forbidden in the covenant kingdom that David led. They were to bow down before no statue or wood carving or anything else that was represented of a deity who was made in the image of animals and man, whereas Yahweh, who was invisible, we are made in his image, could not be depicted in physical likeness because he could not be adequately represented from them. But he has no kind words to say. He acknowledges the fact that idols lead to a miserable life because you lack the substance and satisfaction of a relationship with a real deity who can transform your heart and transform your soul and give you joy and abiding peace. And David just says he wants nothing to do with them or their practices. He would not pour out the drink offering of their blood. I guess that was one of their practices. Again, no two pagan, or for the first time, no two pagan religions are exactly alike, but many of them did have overlapping practices and beliefs and other things of that nature. And I also forgot to read, nor take their names on my lips. So serious. The second and third commandment are closely connected. The third one is to show respect and reverence for the sacred name of Yahweh, who he identifies in the second verse. But in Exodus 23:13, they are forbidden to even make mention of the names of these other deities on their lips, because once we verbally consent, we intellectually consent, and then that trickles down into actually believing there's a mote of truth. So they were told to not even name them, not even discuss them. Don't call them out by name. Just don't even talk about who they say they are, because they really aren't existent. They are. They don't exist. Yahweh is the portion of my inheritance and my cup, and you uphold my lot. So the pronoun me, my, and mine is going to appear numerous times between now and the 9th verse. So these are mostly in reference of David's relationship between him and his maker. So we earlier read in the first verse, my lips. That's in reference to the deities with whom he has no relationship with. But now, my cup, my inheritance, the portion, that does not mean they are his exclusive possession. It only means that he belongs to him and he is aware of it, and he is the one who upholds his lot. So it's all about him, but what he does for us. So the portion just means our sole source of delight and satisfaction, our sole source of refuge, and the inheritance is ultimately the resurrection, which he speaks of in the final 2 verses. And my cup and my lot are just things that they're really gifts from him, because he is not capable of, just like his goodness comes from him, every other blessing that he has comes from the one who is potentially powerful enough to bestow upon anyone the blessing. Lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, a good inheritance is mine. So there's that word again, inheritance, and once more, it is mine. He did not earn it. He's not entitled to it. It is solely and wholly an act of grace that this good inheritance, both the throne on the royal throne in Jerusalem, as well as his eternal and heavenly inheritance, are pleasant, but they even though he enjoys them and belongs to him, they do not emanate or come from him, or they were not created by they were created for, not specifically him, but people for like him, but by the one who is uniquely powerful and able enough to give any inheritance to any of us at all. I bless Yahweh who has given me counsels. My kidneys also instruct me in the nights. So he's giving the due deference to the one whom he consults. Now, he was a king, but he had a counselor, and he was submitted to a heavenly king, and any earthly authority who is not submitted to a heavenly authority cannot be entrusted to exercise or influence any authority on earth. But David, thankfully, was described by Elohim himself as a man after mine own heart in Acts 13:22. So he relied on his counsel. He spoke to him. He had a clear dialogue. He meditated and prayed with him. He spoke to him, and Yahweh spoke to him. And then, the words kidneys and me. So remember, and also he has given me counsel. So there's that pronoun again. But the other thing that begins now is body parts. So there's a frequent prolific mention of body parts which are affected by the phenomenon he's describing. The kidneys here are the first thing mentioned. I have put Yahweh always before me, because he is at my right hand. I am not shaken. So he has his proper priorities in order. It's not about him. It's about Yahweh, always and only. He was not concerned with his glory, his interest. It was all about Yahweh. So he had his correct priorities in order. He comes before us. We owe our existence to him. Hence we must place the one who came before us and brought us into being always and ever before us. He should be our main concern. We should not be self-interested, self-oriented, self-centered creatures, but God-oriented, always and only upward. And all will go well if we treat him like seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and everything else that we need, our provisions, our clothing, our food, and all, etc., will be added unto us. We read of in Matthew 6:33, and earlier the less worldly concerns before that verse. And right hand is the covenantal hand, so again, the body part hand, and because the right hand is also the hand of strength, and that is a source of strength, one that cannot be shaken, moved, overpowered, manipulated, or influenced, because it belongs to one who is omnipotent, which is the attribute of infinite or unlimited strength. So he is an unshakable source of solace for any who trust or seek refuge in him. Trust and seek refuge in him. Therefore my heart was glad, and my esteem rejoices. So the organ that's affected here is heart. That is the body part. It is glad, it is happy, and it is rejoicing, because he stands in the unshakable protection of an omnipotent one who he knows and speaks to as a friend. He has this relationship with him, this intimate relationship, which is reflected throughout the book of Psalms. And the heart is the center of our will, emotion, and but when it is glad, it is also capable of having grief, but is also capable of being glad, and how much more pleasant and delightful that is. And that is an occasion and cause to rejoice, especially when the gladness in our heart comes from him. That way we know it's wholesome. That way we know it's not corrupt or anything wrong. It is completely innocent and defensible if it comes from him. Oh, and I also forgot to read, my flesh also dwells in safety. So there is physical protection to seeking refuge and basking in him and seeking solace and sanctuary and security for him. My flesh, that's another body part that just means his body is also protected, as is his spiritual spirit and soul. So every element of his being is protected when he is protected by Yahweh. For you do not leave my soul in the grave, neither let your kind one see corruption. Now, the grave would have been hell, and so the implicit inference is that there is an alternative to hell, and by the time that Orthodox Judaism came about to being, this, I think that maybe the Pharisees were maybe the progenitors of that. The resurrection had become a cardinal tenet of Orthodox Judaism, and the word itself never appears in the Old Testament, but the concept is self-evident throughout it, in places such as the verses we're about to read, and also in the book of Daniel and Job. So even though it's not as prolific or as defined or promised as often as it is in the New Testament, it is still there. So the alternative to the soul being in the grave. Now, when your soul is in the grave in hell, it is only your soul. There is no body. We know from the New Testament that our bodies will be redeemed on the other side of the resurrection. And the word kind one, it can mean, some translations translated it as me, a self-reference. Others think of it as a messianic allusion. His kind one, it is capitaled in this version. So because this is the version we're reading from, we're going to interpret it as messianic. And he did not see corruption. He was the only one who was born without sin, lived without sin, and died without sin. And because of his incorruptibility, our inheritance is incorruptible and imperishable, and it is through his righteousness and his resurrection that we are saved and atoned for. And you show me the path of life. In your presence is joy to satisfaction. At your right hand are pleasures forever. So the path of life, the path that he charts and leads and outlines and designs, will add life to your years and years to our life. So it is a path not only to life on earth, but life in heaven, more broadly speaking, because in his presence we will be intimately and in proximity to his presence in the afterlife, and there will be joy and satisfaction beyond any earthly equivalent or experience. And the right hand, once again, that word appears again, that is the covenantal hand, the hand of strength, pleasures forever. So there's an eternal dimension to this, pleasures forever. We do not live forever. So David is clearly speaking beyond this life to the next, what awaits him in heaven. He is aware that the resurrection would be made possible through his the promised Messiah. And this is not only prayer, this is prophecy. There are prophetic elements. And David also has a priestly attitude because of all the tribes and divisions of Israel. They were allotted portion of the lands, but even though he lived in the palace and had the most property in all of his nation as the king, he identified with the Levites in saying that Yahweh is my inheritance. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for being here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Take care until then. Bye-bye.